All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Tequila Tuesday, episode number 34. Thanks for being here. I'm here with a good friend of mine and fellow soccer fan and sales leader, sales trainer, whatever you want to call it, LinkedIn influencer. Are we allowed to use that term? Community builder.
You're gonna get banned from LinkedIn again, saying things like that, or YouTube. Sorry.
Dale is a former copier salesman, super famous in that world, known for speaking the truth, being super open, raw, vulnerable, honest. And he's built a killer sales community and company called the Sales Rebellion. And I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit about that and what he does over there and some of his history. We were talking about music just a second ago. He used to be a touring musician as well before he got into sales. He's got a killer story and background. And I'm looking forward to the day where my dogs say hi, Dale. Looking forward to the day where Dale and I get to hang out and chop it up a little bit. So Dale's going to talk to us a little bit tonight about creativity in sales, which is one of his specialties. You know the drill. If you got questions, hit me up. I'll get a list going. I'll take you off mute, and we'll be here for about an hour and a half or so. So Dale, turn it over to you, my man.
That's some fun. First off, though, a little house cleaning. John Stern, what's up, dude? It's good to see you. And what's up, Vicky Gurney? I don't think I've ever been in a room with those two people, so it's super cool to see the two of you in here. Like Scott alluded to, my full name is Dale Dupree. I am the leader of the Sales Rebellion. I think right now they're calling me the Chief Revenue Officer over here because I'm like the only guy that produces anything, but that's a shout out to my awesome sales team right there. I digress. I started selling back in 2002, technically. And let me explain that. I was 16 years old and I was playing in a heavy metal band. And I had to sell my mom and dad on letting me play a show at the United Methodist Church down the street past 10 o'clock, which was kind of like my curfew and like my limit of staying out. And they said, sure, eventually after lots of presentations, discovery meetings, multiple closes, and I had to bring in my boss to get it done for me by one of my other band members. But regardless, we got it done, and I went and played a show that night and fell in love with the music scene. Not that I already wasn't in love with it. Man, this is recording. I'm about to give out so much crap I shouldn't give out. I might have seen the Smashing Pumpkins as a young man, because I'm not that old. And it might have been that I was snuck out of my house to see their last show in Orlando, Florida at the Hard Rock Live. And those are kind of the moments for me of the romance of music in my life. And really, I was raised by an ultra romantic human being, my father, Curtis Dupree, who is the legacy whom I'm chasing on a daily basis to at least try to live in the shadow of at the very, smallest limit that I possibly can, if not become something that he would have been very proud of. I lost him in 2016 to cancer, but as a young man, my dad really helped me to understand that work isn't work, that he had this very awesome balance of understanding what entrepreneurship really was, of running his business and incorporating his family and his mindset of what that looked like into his daily grind. My dad was always home to put me to bed at night. My dad was always at my soccer games. He was always at my basketball games. He was the coach in some cases as well too. And to me, it was amazing watching a guy like that never really fall out of his groove, never complained, had a smile on his face every day. And to really drive this home, my dad lived with chronic ankle pain from a botched surgery that was performed on him back when he was about to go to college to play football for either Alabama, Auburn, Clemson, Florida State, UF. I could name about 20 more. He had a literal scholarship opportunity for each one. He went and had a surgery and they botched it. And he lived for the rest of his life. He was 18 years old with chronic ankle pain. And the guy never complained about it. There's nights that I can recall coming home a little too late, at certain points in my life and trying to sneak in the house. And you could always know when my dad was awake because you would hear this thumping and it would be his foot and he would be banging it against the ground because he couldn't stop because he was in massive amounts of pain all the time. But you'd walk in, through the door and you'd kind of see him and he wouldn't look mad or sad. He'd say, hey, bouncing that foot, right? Banging it against like a cement floor, right? Like really hitting it because he couldn't feel anything and other than pain. So I tell you all that to help you to understand the origins of what we're about to talk about and what drives me. Because I think when we're talking about creativity, it's really important to understand where it comes from for all of us. It's not necessarily something that we develop later in life. It's typically found in our childhood. It's typically found in our middle school and high school years, especially too. And during that awakening that we have for ourselves of understanding more about Dale, more about David, more about Eric, more about Brent, more about Brian, more about Vicky, more about Cynthia, more about Kelsey, more about Valerie, you get the gist. The more we really dive into who we are, what we have to understand is that there's a driving force behind that either is creative or it is not. And now this is the funny part about everything I just said is that my dad wasn't necessarily a creative person, but he had amazing ideas that taught me creativity. For example, my mom's 40th birthday. My dad had about 40 to 50 of my mom's best friends from middle school and high school. There's a pack of them for real. There's 40 or 50 of them. They call themselves the Slumber Girls. They actually, most of them went to college together as well too. And we're all in a sorority together. So that very knit tight group. Well, my dad paid for a makeup artist to come and dress every single person up to make them look 40 years older. So they all looked like they were 80 plus, and they came with their spouses, and they sat at all the tables around my mom and my dad, and they were loud and obnoxious and smacking food and screaming at waiters. Mom's like, where are we? What is going on? And then eventually she recognized one of her, she said, that lady looks just like Delane. And my dad's like, oh yeah, interesting. And then they all stood up and sang her happy birthday, and a big surprise. And so there were things like that in my life that I looked at. I was like 11 years old, and I'm like, what just happened? Like, Dad, that's amazing. What a great idea. And so really at a young age, my dad noticed that I was creative more than anything. And so my dad nurtured that. So coming back to the music side of things, I had a dozen or so scholarships myself in order to play sports or have a full academic scholarship as well too. I had the second highest SAT scores in the state of Florida. What's up? And my mom was my teacher. I was homeschooled, ladies and gentlemen. So props to Bitsy Dupree. And I turned all of them down. So you can imagine my parents were probably chilling at the house when I called that day to say, hey, I'm not doing any of the school stuff and I'm going to tour in a band. Just for fun to see if we can get signed to a label. Probably not the best phone call to get. However, it was a moment in my life where my dad saw that I was walking a very creative path. And that first show, the support that I had toward my creativity was amazing with my parents. Even in the midst of my so-called rebellion, if you will, in that moment of my life, I was hanging from the rafters at the first show, which was sold out. There was over 1,000 people at it. There was probably an ounce of blood somewhere in the room, and everybody was knocking each other out. I'm hanging, literally, not kidding you, hanging from the rafters from my feet, swinging back and forth, throwing my microphone around. And I looked out past the sea of people, and I literally saw my mom and dad standing there with the biggest smiles on their face. And I'm not going to lie, I cried. This big, scary metalhead on stage hanging from the rafters just started crying. And I did a shout out to my parents after that. I gave them a big hug when I saw them in person later that night, and I left for 52 days. Craziest days of my life. You want to talk about creativity? I can't. The stories are not to be told. It's like going to Vegas, right? They're intense stories when you go on tour. So for the next 5 years, I played in a metal band. I was signed to Warner Brothers Records, and I had a lot of fun. And imagine that you go from this role of creativity inside of being an artist and musician to suddenly selling copy machines, which is my path. And I'm not going to explain that. If somebody wants to understand the story better, it takes another hour to really tell. So, but you can always find tons of podcasts of me telling little glimpses of it, or just hit me up. I'm happy to share it at some point in my life, and maybe I'll record it for somebody, but it's very deep. There's a lot that happened, from overdoses to my depression to a lot of things that really affected my lifestyle and made me really look at the quality of life. It's why when I hear Scott's story, and the first time, why I really wanted to connect with him, because what has happened in my life isn't even close to what's happened in Scott's, but it is one of those pieces of the puzzle that people that have dealt with trauma share. when they see it in other folks, and we resonate. We say like, "Cool, I hate that you had to go through those things, but I'd love to talk to you because I've got something similar in my own experience." So fast forward to copier sales. Imagine a guy 6'2" with hair down to his chest about right here. And by the way, it was long and straight and beautiful, ladies and gentlemen, and giant gauges in my ears. I can't really show you, it's hard to see, but I had 5/8 quarter inch, I think, actually at one point in my ear. So I had these giant holes in my ears. I'm tatted up all over my body. And imagine that shows up like day one to a copier sales job, which is a commodity sale, which is suit and tie, which is door to door. It is old school selling. And this was the year 2007 or 2008 timeframe when I really started working for my father and selling copy machines. Now, listen, the plan was that I heard if I did that, and my dad even told me this, hey, come and sell for a couple years. You can get a job anywhere if you can last in copier sales. And he said, and I'll have zero favoritism with you. I'll give you 12 months. And if you hit your numbers, if you do a good job, I'll let you stay on. Well, guys, I hit my number by like this much, right? Like barely freaking hit my number. And it was like the hardest year of my life. I'll never forget knocking on doors, banging the phone, going hard at 22 years old, and really hating everything about it. I'm just being honest. It wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy it, but the success that came from it wasn't monetary at the time, especially because this is 2008. Does anybody remember 2008?
It's a crash.
A couple head nods, big crash. I remember driving into the office and listening to George Bush talk about bailing out the auto industry as the stock market was diving into nothing, pulling into my office, walking into my dad's office going, are we going out of business? What's happening right now? And for the next, consequently, like 2 or 3 months, we've probably picked up about $600,000 in revenue, existing revenue from accounts that closed their doors. So we almost crashed and burned in the process. And so really it was a rebuild. And so hitting my numbers was not only a miracle, it was the only thing that was going to keep the business going. So when we go back and analyze though that year, even though I make it sound like I was, suit and tie doing my thing, there was a point about 6 to 7 months in that I showed up one day with a t-shirt and not with a button down and with jeans. And my dad looked at me like I was nuts for a second, but he was willing to give me a chance. It was a Friday. I said, dude, I'm just going to go get some donuts and I'm going to go door to door and I'm going to take one donut out and be like, I'm broke. I don't have any money. I just want to meet people here and get to know you. And I've only got one donut because I got to make 24 calls. And literally is what I did. And I met every person that I stopped in to try and meet on that, in that round of donut handouts. And what I learned, because I didn't sell anything from that, by the way, nothing, never went back to the accounts to sell, didn't sell anything from that. What I learned was that there's this powerful piece inside of sales that we miss so often, which is connection, which is individuality, which is strategy behind how to create something that makes somebody curious. So that creative side for me was this talk track that I had kind of developed inside of walking with these 24 donuts into doors and holding a napkin and pulling out a donut or being like, what's your favorite one? I'll leave it with you. Or could you get it to Chad? Could you get it to Nancy? It was a lot of fun to do it. And I just let go, right? I let go of everything. I stopped caring about the outcomes. I stopped caring about the expectations. And I just acted like Dale Dupree for the day. It was really, really, really relieving at that point in my life. And I ran with that. So within the next year, I developed a brand called the Copier Warrior, which I'm going to show you guys a little bit of in a second. I've actually never done this, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I've never showed anybody my old Dropbox that I used to use and have all my really cool marketing tools in. So I don't even know what's in there, honestly. I just pulled it up, so we'll see. It should be pretty fun. But really what I did is I sat back and I said, well, how can I be Dale Dupree in everything I do? From my business cards to my talk tracks, to my emails, to my discovery sessions, to my presentations, to my closing, everything. How do I make my whole system Dale Dupree without me influencing it too much to where I become exactly what I'm trying not to be in the process? Hopefully that makes sense to y'all. And it should in a second when I show you everything. But the thought process is, well, cool, I'm going to make this guy that goes to work every day named the Copier Warrior. And that guy ties back into Dale Dupree because there's creativity behind it. There's a brand, there's a fresh face to it. And I'm literally telling the status quo they can shove it every single day that I go out because I don't have a tie on anymore. Instead, I have a button down, but a vest, because this is the brand of the copier warrior now. I'm sure, like, I looked decent still. I don't look like a scrub like I do now. But the thought process was, what can I get away with and be individual, or and express my individuality in the process without being this, the identity of this guy that's like rebelling just to rebel. I never wanted to be that. I didn't want anything to do with that thought process. And I had a lot of that influence on my life because I was listening to the mainstream. I was listening to the Sandler salespeople. I was listening to the Dale Carnegie people. I wasn't actually going back to the roots of those folks either. I was listening to the present day people, right? That were telling me how to sell in the year 2008 and 2009. And really, they had zero freaking idea what they were doing, just the same, in the middle of a recession. But it was an interesting time. It's kind of like the pandemic last year. It was like planned by sales trainers, essentially. Did you see everybody coming out with books that were like how to sell virtually? I mean, it was like so fast that it felt like everybody had that in the cards waiting, right? Oh, this is going to happen any day now. Yeah. We're going to make so much money off of it.
I feel like Jeb Blunt's book came out day one of the pandemic.
Dude, I'm so happy you just said that. I've been cautious about saying that, but like for real.
I'll say it for you. I'm less cautious.
So yes, so the thought process for me back in those days was, okay, I get it that people before me have done a good job. My dad's a great influence on that, the way he built community, the way that he led as a servant leader inside of his sales walk. But I also want to understand a strategy side to this creative person that's just busting at the seams trying to get out of here. Matter of fact, I did a cold call day that first year where my hair was so long, somebody said that I looked a little bit like John Travolta from Pulp Fiction. And so now I had a massive beard, so I shaved the whole thing off and had the hair down and wore the exact outfit from the movie kind of thing. And I literally went out on Halloween and made cold calls and told everybody that I was John Travolta from whatever movie I just said that I already forgot. And I even had the little like booster needle, and like the whole nine, right? Like it was a lot of fun. And I was telling people like, hey, is your copier broken? I can fix it right now. It was a lot of fun. And again, scripting things, making it unique, right, is important to this, but it's not to a place that it's abstract. It's not to a place where it's like Dale, cue Dale. Dale says this, prospect says that, Dale responds with this. It was an abstract concept around how do we build creative communication and conversation with people specifically. So what I want to show you guys real quick, and as you guys are seeing this, please feel free to chime in and shut me up at any point in time and ask questions, but okay. All right. Let me get a feel for this real quick. Yeah, this is the one we want to. Now let's start with this, actually. So this was actually the first design that I created for a business card. And now imagine that this was kind of a handheld business card, but a little non-traditional, all right? So imagine that it's maybe just a couple inches bigger left to right, width and height, right? So on it, as you can see, is a baby taking a bath on the top of a coffee machine with some pancakes and a Thanksgiving turkey in the bottom of the base, the desk of the copier. There's a coat rack.
Just to be clear, this was your business card?
This was my business card. Yes, correct.
Amazing. Okay.
So you can hold this in your hand, and on the front, this is actually a master of it. So on the front was really just this baby. On the back, it said in very bold, big letters, this line down here at the bottom: I could make your life easier with the right solution. And so I was walking in places and saying like, hey, do you guys have multifunction devices, but can they multifunction like this? And just having a lot of fun with it, right? And getting a lot of laughs out of people. People would say, oh, does it make bagels as well too? You know, you could literally get people to engage with you through the concept of what I was doing here. Now imagine for a second also that 99% of the copier people that are walking in the front door, because I was the 1%, were handing you a card that was straight out of, Patrick Bateman's favorite movie. And the idea of like everybody nerding out about these stupid business cards all the time. Like I couldn't stand it. It happened all the time in my industry. When the first time I watched that movie, American Psycho, I was like, this is literally the copier world. These people are the copier people. That's insane. So the thought process was that I was the one dude out there that was handing you something so significantly different that you remembered me much differently than everybody else as well too. And that was the purpose of it, was to create a memorable and familiar moment for somebody. So what I started to recognize too was that if I really want to create familiarity, what I got to tune into is I got to tune into what people are used to seeing and what people are used to having to deal with, not just clever stuff. So I created this guy who is like the sleazy copier salesperson. And I think I can zoom in on this. Hold on, bear with me as I work that angle. Come on, internet. There we go. So this contract is my favorite part of it. It's a contract that promises that this is the best, most coolest copier in the whole wide world ever with spot for signature. And people would get this card and they loved it. Now, this was not a traditional business card. This was an 8.5 by 11 sized cardstock picture that I literally left for decision makers.
Is that you in the picture?
Yes.
That's so great.
Awesome. So, and it's all photoshopped obviously as well too, but we had to just make me look ridiculous. I mean, guys, let's just for the record,
good.
Let's just zoom in on how terrible this is. So I had a really cool design team and just like marketing team in general that I tagged to do this project with me. It was a lot of fun. But the messaging, it was all about the messaging. And there's something here that we're going to talk about in a second as well too, that I developed during this. As you can see, the paper is crumpled up. So what we would actually do with this particular drop is that we would tell people most of the marketing brochures and whatnot that you get are trash. And so we made this one trash too, to make it easier for you to identify and throw away. It's literally what I was telling people. And this turned into what is now renowned as the crumpled letter campaign, which is one of the things that caught the attention of a ton of sales leaders around the world while I was still selling copiers, and really led to me starting Sales Rebellion and becoming a coach and my own boss in the process. So messaging is important. The idea of what you're seeing, you can't let everything weigh on what someone will perceive. You have to also guide them through the story of what it is that you're trying to tell. That's a huge piece about creativity that a lot of folks don't understand. So we have to think about the audience and their journey more than we do about our preferences and than anything else. It's extraordinarily important because this was super uncomfortable for me to do, to take pictures like this. Like, I'm a pretty outgoing person, but like to make myself look disgusting. Matter of fact, here's the most disgusting one I did that I have no problem showing because I'm so embarrassed by it. And I'll zoom in on it even to show you just how terrible this is. But we made this one just to create vulnerability in moments so that it was easier for me to get into this identity of what, if it speaks to the audience, let's do it. I never used this one, by the way. This is totally a joke, just for me. It's in here for zero reason, y'all. But that turned into this idea, though, of what the copier warrior was. And here he is, the copier warrior in the flesh. So this is actually the first visual that we ever created of the copier warrior. This, ladies and gentlemen, was a 6-foot cardboard cutout with a 3-dimensional backdrop. I had this printed in a way that literally had the backdrop of the woods, and I was protruding out of everything in a cardboard cutout, and even the lettering. So the lettering kind of bounced off the back, and it says clearly, every morning he wakes up believing this is his job, and here I am in the middle of the woods pulling a sword out of a golden copy machine. And really, again, messaging, it's all about what journey are we taking people through. I love the call to action at the bottom. Sometimes extraordinary isn't just service, it's a complete lifestyle choice. What we wanted to build inside of the copier world, me and my team of branding experts, was we wanted to build something it wasn't just like a one-hit wonder concept. It would become a lifestyle for copier reps. That was my goal. I wanted to give the youth, especially because I was part of it, an outlet to be able to do stuff like this. And not just because it looked funny and it was fun for people, but because it worked. So we also had this idea of, back in the day with creativity, of how do we do things like a Christmas card that's non-traditional? Well, I sent these out on Thanksgiving, the first year that we ever did this, a cornucopia of awesomeness, like the corniest dad joke you ever heard in your life. And I literally just had a message of Happy Thanksgiving to my clients, friends, and family. And I sent these to all my prospects, all my clients, all my friends, every single person, because the real goal here was to brand myself more than anything, and to have people, again, relate to me, and also to find familiarity when they saw, oh, you're that copier warrior guy, was the thought process around this. So I'm going to show you guys my favorite postcard in the world. This is when I first got into direct mail. I know you guys are probably thinking like, well, this isn't relevant. It's 2021. Well, we still send direct mail at the Rebellion. We actually, like
there might be a few people here, Dale, who work at companies that send direct mail,
Can we see some people raise some hands if they are? Oh, Eric.
Yeah.
Sick.
John
I'm sure Dale Zawinski is raising his hand right now. He definitely works for a direct mail company. What's up, Dale?
He's driving, so let's keep his hands on the wheel.
Please don't say anything. So
that's right.
There he is. So here's my direct mail piece. I sent these out to 500 companies and decision makers in my territory. On the front is me and Chuck Norris and Angus MacGyver. A link back to copyyourwarrior.com. Feel free to type that into your browser if you're feeling lucky tonight. And I had this messaging of like, yeah, they make movies about people this awesome. It just caused a massive amount of curiosity in people. Who is this guy? What is happening? I'm leaned against a copy machine next to a dude that kills people in movies for a living and a guy that's carrying a bomb over his shoulder. Like it definitely stirred an intentional look deeper into Dale. And so that was my direct line at the time. Unfortunately, I really wish that I owned that number because I would make an awesome voicemail on it for all of you to listen to every time somebody dialed it, but it's been disconnected. So I literally put stamps up in the top corner and had a message to each person that I hand wrote in that blank space. 500. So I took the time out of my life to do that. Sent all these out, and all 500 of those people eventually became my clients. So
all 500,
every single one of them, from 2011 to 2019.
Wow!
It took me that long, but still,
you still got all of them.
And if you think about the copier world, let me tell you all something. The copier world, a typical copier rep usually signs about 8 to 10 new marks a year, which would be a customer that's never done business with the organization. That's the standard and the average in the industry, 8 to 10. If you hear somebody doing 30, you literally do one of these. You did how many? 30? That's awesome. But if you ever saw my numbers, they were in the 70s. Matter of fact, like people called my bluff on it all the time in the industry. That's not real. There's no way. Well, thankfully I had bosses, and I still do, that can vouch for me on those things and all of the numbers that I wrote with the company. But that's besides the point. What I'm really getting at here is that if we're super intentional about our outreach, if we start in places that nobody else is willing or need to go, if we're creative in a way that tells people a story that takes them through a journey that is theirs more so than it is mine, because sure, this highlights some of me, but when you head to copyyourwarrior.com, the first thing that comes up is a highly curated video where I tell you it's Monday morning in your office. The weekend is wearing off and reality is slowly setting in as you get back to work. But let's be honest, the only thing on your mind is whether or not the copy machine is broken. And we went into these scenarios of the copier being broken, multiple scenarios. As a matter of fact, we had a skeleton guy, Fred, on the phone with tech support and a voicemail talking, saying, it will be 500 days until tech support is available, something ridiculous, right? Like awesome video that really resonated with the pain that people felt, but more importantly, the ability to be able to just like, oh, God, finally somebody said it. I've been waiting for somebody to say this, and creating that familiarity for a person to be able to relate to in that moment is super powerful. It builds credibility and trust. People don't have to like what they see here. They don't have to like this version of me. But what happens?
That's a really good point right there, actually. Yeah.
And I think that you would agree with it fully, right? Is that we don't need people to like us in sales. We need them to trust us and to feel that we lead in the sea of sameness, that we are credible. Out that the big X and the C of O's, right? Whatever the old school people like to say. So I can never remember. I just call it Dale. Come to my house and I'll show you. But so conceptually though, direct mail, I just want to state this, it still works really well. So shout out to the homies on here that use it. We do a campaigned cadence with these types of things. We have 5 different techniques that we use, which I'm going to show you right now very briefly. And if anybody has any questions about anything that they just saw, please jump in. But these are some of them right here that you're looking at. We have the Rebel business card, which is what you just saw technically. We have the Rebel resume, which is this conceptualized resume for a sales leader that is applying, sorry, not a sales leader, it would be a sales leader for us. Let's just say that one of you sells copy machines. The office administrator, the CTO or the CIO or the CFO would be your typical contacts. So we would send that to all 4 of those roles. And it would be a resume saying, hey, I'm applying to become your copier provider. And we would literally have a resume, just like a regular resume that they would get. And we had 4 different versions of them. So we sequenced that and campaigned it. So I'm not a big fan of this idea of like, you can get an appointment in one call, even though Stu Heineck is one of my mentors, my silent mentors, and now an actual mentor, which is really cool. It's a full circle right there. I agree with him that you can get the attention of anybody if you try hard enough. I don't think that it's appropriate to say that you can get 100% return on a campaign by just having like one item in it. So when I tell you that those 500 mailers I sent out, that I signed every single one of those customers, I had 697 named accounts when I stopped selling copy machines. That was 6 years, literally. So I did that. I gave all my house accounts back when my dad sold his business in 2011. And I did that in 6 years before I left that organization and went on to become a VP of sales for $1 billion organization. So the identity of that, though, this is what I used. So I didn't just send that one card. I knew that it wasn't going to get people's attention. So I had things like the letter campaign, which I briefly mentioned earlier. One of my favorite inside of the letter campaign is what we call the coffee stain letter. So I'll show you these assets real quick. I'm going to show you a picture of not only the letter, but also the envelope that goes with it. So imagine that you're chilling at your desk and your personal assistant or the mailroom calls up, and sends in a document to you like, you got to check this out. It never just showed up to people. I always found that to be the case. Somebody would get their hands on this because it was unlike anything that they'd ever seen.
They'd open it first.
They would check it out because number one, think about the year 2011 and 12 a little bit deeper. What was popular to be sent in envelopes to people at that point in time? Does anybody remember?
Some sort of poison.
Yes. We won't say it on this recording.
I can't remember what it is right now.
Starts with an A and it's a metal band from the
Anthrax. Yes.
So there was that. And then remember, there was terrible things happening like bomb threats, and they were coming through the mail. And
people
so
were
here I am.
Sketched out to open the mail.
Yeah. So, and I had an awareness of it, but I wasn't going to live in fear around that. I was willing to take the heat on that. I was willing to field those phone calls. And let me tell you right now, everybody, it happened multiple times. And my favorite part was when I got the chance to really like have the conversation with the person and they realized, oh, this is just a joke. And it's actually a really good one. Okay, come by and see me sometime. But those conversations started out heated, like getting the worst phone call you ever got. So you can see there's this coffee stain here in the middle of the dock. There's one up here in the corner of the letter as well, too. And when somebody opens this and looks at it, it basically, the copy itself, this is just a sample, not nothing that is groundbreaking. But we would tell people that you're probably wondering what break room this letter crawled out of. The truth is that most of the sales waste that comes across your desk is as useful as a coffee coaster. So I took the liberty to prepare this one for your mug. And we would relate to people and all the garbage essentially that they were getting from salespeople. So now if I go back to the campaign itself, you can apply the coffee stain letter to the crumpled letter, which was pre-crumpled to make it easier to throw away. The pre-burnt letter, which was literally a half on fire so that they could just burn it easier. We made jokes about marshmallows and hot dogs over the campfire. The traveling letter, which is essentially for the super busy person, right? Like, hey, you're so busy, this letter had to travel all around the world trying to find you. And when you combine all 4 of these concepts, and there's more than this, there's about 12 in total. We're just looking at 4. When you combine these concepts and you create sequencing around this type of creativity, you've never, ever, I'm telling you right now, and maybe some of you have experienced this, you've never experienced outbound activity creating inbound outcomes in your life like this, where people literally book your calendar from a QR code they scan, they set time with you, they buy from you, and they don't go through the traditional process that everybody else did. They tell you things like, you are worth my time. I like what you've created and are sending to me. And this isn't just about this campaign. This is the identity of giving people a release at their office from the bull crap that they have to deal with on a daily basis more than anything. It makes them laugh. It makes them smile. Even if they don't really like it, they say to themselves, man, that was different. That was different. I can respect that, right? So we love sending these to C-suite executives because of what, they've gone through inside of their lifetime in order to get to where they have. There's a lot of respect for going above and beyond on things like this as well too, as opposed to just like an admin person or the receptionist, right? But we also had awesome tools for those people as well. So I had an empty box campaign. I don't know if anybody really follows me on the worldwide interwebs. Google, I think, is what it's called these days. But the idea, though, of dropping off empty boxes to me was kind of sketchy. I'd first come up with this, like, why don't I drop off empty boxes that'll get people to call me? But then I curated and crafted the donut, the pizza, and the cookie concept, and all three of them were empty. And what I did is I put like the grease stain from the donut or the grease stain from the pizzas and like little pepperoni stamps like all over it. And I'd have this note on the top of the box. So imagine you get this big box and you open it up and like literally staring back at you at the top of the box, it says, "Hey, I ate all of this waiting for you to call me back." That's all it would say. And then there'd be a QR code for them to scan. So you piss some people off for sure, without a doubt. But it was great because they'd call you mad, like, "Where's the pizza?" And you'd say, it's on its way. You got time this Friday, 2:00. So creativity can really it can put the ball back in the buyer's court is the idea here, because it gives them the permission to separate themselves from the monotony and to give you the opportunity to serve them as well too, which they're looking for as buyers in general, right? When we're selling to somebody and they're buying something, it's typically their job to do that. And so if all that's calling on them is a bunch of stale, "Hey, can I have 27 seconds? Oh man, I'm sorry if that offends any of you. Can I have 27 seconds to tell you what it is that I'm calling about?" Like, if that's just happening over and over for people, it's going to be at some point something that they're waiting for and they're looking to hear. So if you can interrupt that pattern, and my favorite for a little while was this kid I was coaching, he would call and say, "Hey, can I have 27 seconds? Sorry, my old school sales training kicked in there for a second. My name's Mick. What's yours?" And I'm talking, this kid had more conversations than you ever heard in your life. Because if we can interrupt the pattern that people are used to, they'll change the way that they communicate with us, they converse with us, because they will relate it to something that they like more so than something they have to be doing. What do we got here? Come on, this is a fiery room. Anybody got any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, we got. I got a couple questions lined up. We'll go with Eric first. Eric Davidek.
Hey, Dale.
Up,
this is awesome, man. I'm inspired. I appreciate it very much. And I've been following your stuff for a long time, so it's great to talk with you. I'm kind of curious. So it sounded like there might have been a little bit of almost kind of desperation at the onset of you kind of deciding like, hey, and by the way, I love how you put it, like, I got to let go and be Dale. It kind of sounded like you were backed into a corner a little bit with that feeling. And I'm curious about, like, how do you get to that place where you can give yourself, permission to be creative and to, especially if you're in an organization, like I'm weird as fuck, but it's hard to bring that in and have it, get buy-in from the suits.
Man, what a great question, Eric. I appreciate the question very much, actually, because it's a hard one to answer, honestly, for most people, but not me. I'm going to tell you right now that at that point in my life, I had already tried to commit suicide 4 years earlier. And so depression was something that was very prevalent in my life. It still is. I still battle it. But I'm winning that battle every day. And I profess that as much as I possibly can. But at the time, I was losing that battle. And imagine that you're this guy that is growing up in a generation, by the way, for everybody listening, it seems like most people are in my age group. I'm a millennial. I'm growing up in a generation I'm being told that, like, I'm lazy. And as a man, I'm being told that, like, I got to be powerful and strong. And I got to be like these people on TV that I'm watching. And it was really a conflict for me because my father was the influence of being nurturing and empathetic And love was the language that my father spoke, not hate, not dissidence, not, do it your way and just, create your own path. It was this mindset of community oriented concepts. So to Eric's point there, you're all alone in this choice because no one will do it with you. Right. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, this sucks. Like, what if it doesn't work? What if I get in trouble? It was bad at first, but I basically went to my dad, and thank God I had my dad. That's all I got to say. You guys probably have shitty leaders that aren't like my dad. And I'm not saying all of you, but it's very prevalent in the sales world to just have a shitty leader. It's just part of the culture, which is sanity, which is why I started a sales rebellion, because we have to sit back and start to recognize some of the truths. I was a shitty salesperson before I decided to step out of this cloak and this mask I was wearing of like, this is what salespeople do. Go in, slam the appointment, push, 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 get the deal, little white lies, whatever you want to label it as. And over here, my dad saying, be honest, be yourself, be authentic, be Dale. And even in the midst of that, can you imagine, Eric, what it was like my traditional father, because he was a pretty traditional guy, like regardless of his love for me, walking in and showing him that stuff that I just showed you guys. It was awesome to think in my head that my traditional dad isn't going to like this, and awesome to see his reaction of just like, all right, dude, well, let me know how this goes. And I'm sure even in his head, he thought, this is not going to work because no one had done it, right? So what I would say to it is, you got to be weird AF, like you mentioned, in a way that translates your authenticity and allows people to come into your culture. So the way that I created all those things, yes, there was some silliness to them, but if you notice, like everything had a copy machine tied into it, right? The language that I spoke, the love language, was about the problems that the copy machine creates. And so my father had no objection to that. Matter of fact, the guys that bought him, they also, even very traditional men, in the business world, man, they pushed a little bit in the beginning. I thought I was going to have to quit after 3 years of doing this. I was like, I'm going to be out. And I ended up spending 13 years in the industry, right? But they said, all right, we'll give it a shot, because they saw my numbers and they thought, well, if he could double or triple this, I mean, this could be pretty awesome. Well, I became the #1 rep within 90 days. So not only did I do what I wanted to do, but I did it as a rebel, dude. I didn't ask permission. I didn't say, hey, can I do this? I just did it. And I didn't do it out of being malicious or intentionally trying to harm anybody. I did it because I wanted to build something bigger than life. I wanted to build the legacy that I watched my father build. When I stood up on stage in 2016 at his funeral was when I had the most clarity I had ever had in my existence. When I walked up there after having my back to this crowd of people for the entire duration of what was happening, and I looked out for the first time. And literally from left to right, wall to wall, all the way to the back, literally lined out the little archway, still coming in, sitting on laps, standing, the room was full. And the room only held 1,000 people. There was at least 1,500 people in this place. I didn't recognize half the people in here. And in my head, imagine what's happening. I'm about to read something to honor my dad. And all that's going to my head is, who are these people? Are they in the wrong funeral? What's going on? And this was, again, a clarity moment for me to be able to say, like, I'm glad I took the risk. I'm glad that I am Dale authentically, and that I don't care what my bosses think about that, but that I do care about what my community thinks. Because the first person that came up to me afterwards said, Dale, I met you when you were this tall. They did one of those, right? I'm sitting a little low here, but down by the waist. I said, you pushed a copy machine into my office with your father. And they said, your dad changed my life. And all he was a copier sales rep. That's all I could think of. And to me, it was this moment of clarity of, man, why live a boring, shitty life? Why not take the risk? Why not try to go hard? Why not look at what it is that you're doing particularly and ask yourself, does this serve my master, my boss, or does it serve my community? Does it serve the people that I truly want to identify with, that I want to be a part of the ecosystem of? And as soon as that happened for me, bro, it was like lights out. Like I almost like had to get fired from that job essentially because of like how off the wall I started to get. Like they started coming to me going, "What are you doing? Like this is even crazier than what you've done before." And I said, "Yeah, and it's gonna get crazier. So if you don't want me here, let me go." And that's when Xerox picked me up and wanted me, right? So the other side of it is there's someone out there, Eric, that will let you have that freedom. I'm not telling you to quit your job, bro. I'm just there's someone out there that will let you have that freedom. And sometimes it is the people right there under that roof and in those four walls, but we've never had that conversation with them, or we've never risked it and had to have that meeting with them where they go, "So we found this email you've been sending out, and it's not very appropriate." And then you come out and you go, "Yeah, well, look at the open rate and how many meetings I set from it." They're like 52 meetings, and you're like, "Yeah, isn't that wild?" And I'll let you know if I close them, because obviously that's good for you. And then when you close 30 of them, they're like, hey, Eric, send that email again. And also, can you write one for the rest of the sales team? So look at it as more of this perspective of a rebellion is based on our choice, not someone else's. And our choice has to be aligned with our community more so than it does our bosses. And I know that sales leaders hate it when I say that. Even the ones that I serve that hire me, they freaking hate it when I say that. They have to, right? Because deep down inside, they know I'm fighting them at the same time too. But you know what they love? They love the results. They love when their rep goes from writing $250,000 in business a year to $1 million. They love that. And for you and for your ecosystem, for your family, for your friends, it does nothing but create prosperity. And if that's the mindset, if it's not just like, I'm going to be a rebel because I don't care, right? If that's the mindset, don't do it. But if it's, I want to rebel because I want to create a legacy that lasts well beyond when I leave this earth from the actions that I take in this moment.
Love it. Thank you.
I actually have the next question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I was looking at your funky business cards and all that stuff, and I was thinking to myself, I wonder if this worked so well because it's so different from that industry, and the delta is like so massive. And then I started thinking about, okay, a lot of people here are maybe in, B2B sales and kind of that LinkedIn world, and you're selling Sendoso, or you're selling outreach and this kind of stuff, Dooley, Chili Piper. And some of these companies give people a little bit of creative license, and some of the companies themselves and their brand have pushed the envelope a little bit. So my question is, if you're in that world that is not so like stale, for lack of a better word, and is a little bit kind of, mildly dangerous or rebellious already, how far do you have to go? Do you have to go as far as you went? Or like, what are some practical like steps maybe people could take to stand out a little bit? I hope my question makes sense. There's a couple thoughts at once.
Perfect sense. So okay. I'll clarify how I hear it. Well, I hear it as some of the people in this room are not with the mainstream. Essentially, they're with people that give license to be creative to an extent and to have a little fun,
a little bit
around, yeah. Send a GIF and an email. That's so silly, like that. Yeah, that's how I hear it. And then what I would say is like, use the formula of creativity. Looks like this: familiarity, curiosity, and undeniable attention. Those are the three pieces of the puzzle to creativity that are.
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, familiarity, curiosity, and undeniable attention. So when those three things can be at the forefront of what you're creating, then now the license to be creative is now being used effectively. We're not just like sending a GIF because it's funny or putting a silly line at the front of our email. We're making full campaigns around this identity of, well, if I'm trying to sell somebody Chili Piper or Sendoso, why? And then also, like, now that I have my why around that, what makes sales boring? And why do people not like the used car salesman? And why do people constantly complain about having to deal with a salesman? So now that's where the familiarity side is. It's like, okay, I'm going to market to buy something. And there was this one time ever in my whole life and 25 years of buying stuff that I had a good sales rep. That's like 90% of buyers, right? And so I went to the market, really, just to clarify that. I went to my market outside of Florida, and I asked people in other states, hey, what would you like to see? And when it comes to outreach, when a copier person calls you, and it was like less obnoxious crap, of people like pretending that they know my boss and saying things like, oh yeah, they're expecting my call. And I just got the whole gambit of like what people were doing. And I applied that into the consistency of what I was creating for familiarity with people, of the problem. I also found out, what are people struggling with from the perspective of the equipment itself too, that could be like generic to an extent. So when you have that formula, it starts to rouse things. You start sitting back and saying, okay, hold on. What is it that I'm missing here in this creative mindset? Because I never had to ask for an appointment to see your copier leases and sell you a copier. Never. I never had to do that, because everything that I used to reach out to people defined the fix, defined the problem, defined the solution more than it did the sale, more than it did the pitch, more than it did, hi, I'm Dupree and I work with North American Office Solutions. I never had to use any of that. So really, like, if you have the license, go all in. As a matter of fact, my favorite person to talk about is Jordan Greek. Go find Jordan Greek on the interwebs. That's kind of an Easter egg right there, but find him on LinkedIn is the place you really want to find him. His personal brand is the Keymaster. And this kid is a stud. He came through our system and turned into this just amazing personal brand. One of the best that I've ever had go through. Another one would be Tim Ducat, D-U-C-A-T. He's a copier sales rep out of Florida, one of my favorite students, one of my favorite things I've ever helped. He created what is called the RIB, which are the reps in black, which spin on Men in Black. And he created a whole cast of aliens that infect your copy machine with problems and issues. And it's all based around the Men in Black thing. Greek, the Keymaster thing that he picked was Ghostbusters. So he used the Keymaster from Ghostbusters concept and created this entire outreach concept, brand, everything. Now, imagine that you're a buyer for a Fortune 500. Because I want to also add this to the mix here. You're a Fortune 500 CEO or CFO. You're up there at the top. Okay. And you're probably, I say this because a lot of you might be thinking, like, just based on Scott's question, like, okay, well, what's the limit to like who I send this to? There's no limit. I have landed some of the largest deals with Fortune 100s and bigger, using this kind of outreach, but Greek is the guy. He reached out to a dude, a massive company. He sent the guy a magazine with the dude on it. And inside of it was like, what happens when you hire the Keymaster? You get so successful in your business that you're on the cover of every magazine. That was the whole thought process behind it. It was sick. And he got a meeting with this guy, right? And then he created a cadence around that of creativity that didn't stop at the outreach, which is a very important piece of the puzzle as well, too. So hopefully that answers you, Scott.
Yeah. And around the not stopping at the outreach part, how do you exercise creativity beyond, let's ignore like direct mail for now. How are you exercising creativity in just like phone calls and trying to get next steps? The email part, like the dumb GIF or emoji thing, like that's a little bit played out, but like, how can you be creative in email conversations in your pipeline? And more importantly, even like on the phone or during the demo process or during the closing process, like what are those opportunities that maybe people haven't thought about or never experimented with?
Yeah, so I'll preface this with that I truly believe that we all have it in us to radically educate somebody and introduce ourselves before we ever make a phone call or ever send an email. And so it's one thing that I preach on a daily basis to people, that if you just go out of your way to do a little bit of an introduction, it's kind of like dropping brownies off at your new neighbor's house on the front door with a note and never seeing them until a couple weeks later when they're out mowing and you're like, hey, what's up? And they're like, Dale, you're the brownie guy. What's up, man? Like, that's the thought process when you really dive down. However, you can do it the same way over the phone or over email. Let's just take a phone call, for example. If let's just say that I sell softwares to auto mechanics, and David is the owner of David Fox is the owner of an auto mechanic shop. And I call up David. Now, if I call him up traditionally and I say some pitch or line like, hey, can I take some time and talk to you, right? Like, it's not really doing what we want it to do. But if I get on the phone and go, hey, David, you guys got 5 bays over there at the office. And based on how many mechanics I saw in there the other day, I'm assuming you can probably get about 19 cars in, from 8 to 5 on a good day. Is that correct? It's a completely different start to a cold call. It's a question. Number one, always start cold calls with questions. And it puts people in either a defense mode of like, well, what do you want and what's going on? But not a defense mode of this is a sales call and hang up, right? It's a completely different defense mode. It's more like, I'm curious, right, guys? Because I just told you the 3 keys to this: familiarity. So what did I do to create that in that moment in that talk track? Curiosity. What did I do in that moment to create that? And then radical attention, where somebody can't deny that you have their attention in that moment. And really, like when someone says something like, well, what do you do? Well, all of us should never answer that with, well, my name is this and I work for this company, right? When people say, what do you do? We should always be ready to answer that with what we fix. Well, Scott, I'm calling about the bays and how many cars you can get in because you're losing money, bro. And that's what I do. I help people find those gaps and I fix them, or I at least recommend somebody else that can. If you want me to get off the phone, bro, I'm happy to. And if those are the types of conversations you're having with people, they're much more real, they're much less standard from a business perspective, and they're really impacting the person on the other end of the call. So that's my best example of it, right? Because you guys can all take that and think like, how do I start an email? Well, if you put in the subject line, the worst email you've ever gotten in your life, I'm going to see that in my inbox and I'm going to be like, there's some
You're curious. I mean, you're automatically curious a little bit, right?
And then if I get into it and I find familiarity and I got attention, right, in that first line, then I'm in.
Let down. Yeah. Vicky had a question. Vicky, I don't see you on camera, but you take yourself off mute. You want to ask your question?
Which Vicky? Me, Vicky, or the other Vicky?
Well, I meant Vicky M, but you can go next, Vicky G.
That would be me, Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Dale, I got to tell you, watching all the visuals that you were putting through, you remind me of a Heath Ledger. I'm a big movie fan, and I was watching this thinking, you're like Heath Ledger because you're so different, or Jack Nicholson. You're so different, but you're committed with courage and conviction. And I think that's what makes it believable, because it's really, completely out there, but you do it with such conviction that people buy into it. And I just love it. Now, what I was wondering is these tangible visual masterpieces are great in that former door-to-door business world. But what would you suggest? Are there any tips or ideas for our new remote Zoom era of business?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Vicky. So we got a student, unfortunately cannot say the name of the company that contracted me, but they were selling to Bank of America. The CFO is in North Carolina, and he wasn't at his office. Actually, Bank of America wasn't receiving mail, wasn't taking meetings. I mean, they were like closed during the pandemic. And now this guy had to set an appointment though. I mean, like literally his boss, when they hired me, it was like, if he doesn't set an appointment, we're going to have to let him go. Like, he's been here 2 years and he's way behind on his numbers. And I love that, because give me the lost, the weary, and the broken of sales, because I will fix them and I will support them through that process. I'll go all the way to the depths and back with you. So we did a ton of research. And so this can sometimes take a little bit of time, right? But what we ended up doing was we sent something so radical to his office that they had to let him know, even though it was closed. And they just simply said, you got a package here, but it's not a normal package. And they sent him a picture of it, but they didn't open it. Okay. And what we did is like, imagine that you've got like a 6x6 foot box that's just stuffed with things, right? Imagine that shows up. It's like a giant, it's like 4 TVs stacked next to each other, right? Like, what is this? Right? Is this a trampoline? What's going on here? So what happened was there was also an email that said, I know you're curious, in the subject line. And inside of the email was just a picture of the box and in its former state before it was packaged. So you could actually see what was in the box, but from a distance. And so the guy, it took 2 weeks and poking just a little bit, right? We did some content stuff through LinkedIn. We did some very strategic things. Took 2 weeks, but he wrote back and he said, hey, could you just send me what's in there? Because I can't go to the office. And I'll never forget that moment, because homie calls me up. He's freaking out. Dude, I just got this email. You got to hear this. And he's like, I'm going to email him back. And I said, no. Don't email him back. Right? Because he was going to say, this is what's in it. I said, write him back and say, what is your home address? I'll send it to you. And so he writes him that, okay? And guy writes back laughing and says, I'm not giving you my home address. So then what we did is we sent him a pin for a UPS store that was in the vicinity of where he lived, because he said on multiple podcasts where his neighborhood was, right? Like in the area of this place in North Carolina. So we sent a pin for 2 UPS stores actually and said, which one's more convenient? We'll drop it there. And the guy said this one. And so not only did we send him what was in the box, but we sent it to him in pieces, one at a time. So the box we sent to the Bank of America was a ploy. It was a decoy. There was nothing in it. And the picture of all the stuff going into the box was like him thinking, oh, this is in the box, right? That was the thought process. And what we did is we did a ton of research on the guy, and he had been in the aerospace world, and he'd actually raced like drones before they were actually drones back in the day. In Cape Canaveral, we found all kinds of cool stuff around that. And we sent him basically this messaging of like what it's like to be in aerospace or aeronautics even, and then also the CFO of a major banking corporation and how those two things correlate. And so we did all this messaging about gauges inside of an airplane, and if one of them is off, what happens and how that relates back to his business, and then the solution that we provided for those things on top of it. So what I would say, like, that's a long answer to a what it could have been a short story of just like use a UPS store. But the thought is that there are ways to do it no matter what. Another really good example is we were trying to get a group of country clubs for a customer. We had a helicopter fly over top of the country clubs and drop 1,000 golf balls on hole 17. And there's a reason for that. I'm not going to give that secret away, but on hole 17, we had them drop 1,000 golf balls, and all the golf balls had messaging on them and QR codes. And can you imagine being the groundskeeper, right? Like in the middle of the night, this happened too, by the way, like 2 a.m. So they got air clearance, the whole nine. We spent a lot of money on this, by the way. It was like $20,000. Had the sale was 25 million, and they got it, right? So like you got to think about like what's the weight behind the success that could come from doing things like this. Is it worth it? And really, like, what kind of impact am I making on these people? The guy from Bank of America, he wrote a handwritten note to the rep and said, I just wanted to thank you for honoring me in the process. And who says that? Who gets that kind of attention either? And so to me, it's a blessing to be able to watch guys and girls like that to work their craft, have a lot of fun using some of our guidance, because really at the end of the day, it's not us. Rebellion is a community, right? It's the authenticity of people like you, Vicky, to be able to say, hey, what should I be doing in a Zoom era? Well, the answer is that we all still want that to not be a Zoom era. So if you think about that for a second and try to figure out how to relate and connect with people in a way that they desire to be related to and connected with, you'll get it.
Thank you.
All right, Vicky G, your turn.
Well, hello there. Dale, I just want to know one thing. First of all, I'm not a video person at all. It's unusual for me to even be on camera for one of Scott's things. But did you get my birthday video on LinkedIn?
Did you send me a birthday video?
It's
No,
okay.
I haven't.
It's all right. You get a crap ton of stuff. But I just want to know, I trusted you to branch out and to do that.
I'm going to check that video out, and thank you for sending that.
No, you don't have to really, because it's terrible. But for those of us that are a little bit older, some of this stuff is really, really challenging. So to step out and to find things. Now I can send a crumpled letter versus like doing a video or whatever. But I really do appreciate you, and I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Oh, thank you, Vicky. I appreciate that. It's really good to connect with you like this too. I know we've talked for like a year or more on LinkedIn, so thank you.
That was Vicky's question. She just wanted to throw you under the bus, Dale. It's really.
Yeah, I feel so embarrassed. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm so sorry. That was not my intent at all.
You're so fine.
Oh my gosh, Vicky, I'm just.
You were totally fine.
Settle down, Vicky. I'm just teasing you. Relax.
You're totally fine.
Everything
you're right.
good.
I think I have 14,000 unread messages on LinkedIn right now. I have a goal to respond to each one, and so it's really difficult.
Yeah, listen. When you're that far deep, you just need to declare bankruptcy.
I know. Everybody keeps telling me that, dude.
Just nuke the whole thing and start over. It's so much easier.
I'm almost 1 year behind. I've been 2 years for the last like
Oh my
6
goodness.
months. I'm almost
Oh
to
my
1
goodness.
year. So
I got another question for you. It's a question about creativity in leadership in particular. How do you exert creativity in the way you manage others, in the way that you empower them, and that type of stuff? How does that manifest itself, for you, and what tips and advice could you give? Because there's a bunch of sales leaders and a couple CEOs on this in this group right now. So
great question. I think one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle of sales in general, but also creativity that's important is that we meet people where they are in their own state of mind of around what creativity is to them. So like Vicky made a great point, and I can actually kind of start with that because I help as a fractional manager for a few companies where I am in charge of people that are over 45, over 55 years old selling. And it's a really intense conversation that you have to have when you first start these contracts of, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, that there are going to be people that are going to see my crazy antics and they're going to go, I'm not doing that. And that's totally okay, because what we want is we want to tap into their own creativity. So there's a time and a place for this. Let's go back to my days at Xerox when I was running Xeno in Florida. I had 19 sales reps that were in my bin, and I was directly in charge of 11. And now I influenced the other 8 through the process of what I was doing with the 11. And by the way, 11 is too much for a manager. And I said that from the very beginning. I believed that I should have only had 7 or 8, but I made it work with 11. And it was a diverse group. We had Black male and female. We had Hispanic males. We had Hispanic females. We had a guy from Croatia that always said, like, don't call me white, it's offensive. It was wild what we had, like, and that's like a real thing that he would say, right, as well too. So you have to be very careful about people's culture, what they'll entertain around creativity and how that works. So I had this diverse group of people. The oldest was 58 at that point in my group, and the youngest was 22 years old. So how do I do this? Like, how do I get everybody posted on LinkedIn? How do I get everybody using video? How do I get everybody sending crumpled letters, right? Well, you don't. The idea is that creativity through leadership is, again, meeting people where they are. So that means that you can't go in and have an old school sales meeting because the new school kids on the block aren't going to relate to that. You can't go in and have a new school sales meeting because the old school kids on the block aren't going to relate to that. Instead, you let the people on your team run your meetings. That's the best thing I ever did. And sure, I was like coaching through the meetings, but when we talked about quotas and numbers and what's going on with you, how can we help you this week? We allowed other people to express those things in the group, and we collaborated as a unit. Hey, let's get some young ideas around this. Hey, let's get some more tenured ideas around this. And everybody was into that concept of collaboration through the concept of creativity. My favorite is that we had a blitz that we did where everybody agreed on a drop piece. And what we did is we made these bricks. I don't have any on me. I wish I did. I'm on the road right now, but we had these little bricks. They were foam bricks, like squishy balls. And the brick on the front of it said copier warrior on it. And so I let everybody identify as a copier warrior when I was their boss. So that was like the cool part about having me as your boss. Nothing else was cool, but we had these little copier warrior bricks made and an instruction manual that was designed and curated by the entire team. And it was a beautiful piece. And I watched the conversions happen on that blitz day and knew that it would work out that way because they were very thoughtful, they were very intentional, and they used the masterpiece of the 3 most important elements of how to cause an awakening for somebody through creativity, but in their own unique ways that they collaborated on. So imagine you're watching like a reality TV show and it's like they split random strangers up into groups and say, you got to build this thing, right? And imagine that there's one group that does it really well. Well, I had that group and it was a blessing. But at the same time too, those bricks, what was great about them is that they would hand them to the receptionist. The whole goal of the day was, from their creative minds, was to literally make the receptionist feel good about their job. And so they would hand the brick to the receptionist and they would say, without trying to set appointments or convert anything, they would say, hey, this is for you. We all know that when someone needs prints or copies done, you're the first person that they hit up when the copier is not working. Hey, call the copier company. It's broken again. And every single receptionist, like clockwork, was nodding their head and laughing and saying, yep, that's me. Well, we made you this brick. It's a magic brick. And all you got to do is throw it as hard as you possibly can at the copy machine. It'll fix it instantly. And they would laugh a little and we'd go, not really. It'll just make you feel better. But that's what really matters, right? And that same person would connect with the 58-year-old or the 22-year-old in that moment. Their age demographic didn't matter because it was the story that we were all telling. So again, that was a collaborative moment. And it is actually something that I did. I just never exposed it to them, right? Something I'm very famous for actually from back in 2010 when I took sponges and I made them into little bricks. But so we did curate it a little bit differently. But these people didn't know my story. They had never even heard of me. It was a great fresh start for me because I was able to be a leader that met people where they are in a very distinct way. Where there wasn't this expectation of like, here comes the copier warrior. Most of them had literally just heard that about me and my brand when I came on board. And so it was a beautiful moment for me to be able to just go in with people and say, hey, like, I'm not a big, scary, crazy animal like you probably might think. I actually want you to be successful. So let's collaborate on that. So to me, it's more about coaching than it is about managing at the end of the day. And we had a 795% increase in sales for that branch for the fiscal year. So
I love that it's more about coaching and and less about just like creative policies and things like that. You know, I have asked that question before to other people, and they're like, "Well, we have 4-day work weeks and stuff like that." Like, that stuff is great and it's different, but it's not like practical. And I think more people need to think in practicality, like something you can be doing every single day with your group and with your people. So I love that answer. John Stern, you're up.
Thanks, Scott. And thanks, Dale, for putting this on. It's great to see you after all our conversations. And I did a little research. Your 321 phone number is owned by Dex Imaging in Tampa. I think we can get that back for you if you want it. We have to negotiate with them. And I was going to let it go, but you did mention QR codes 3 times. So I'm a little stung over here because, those weren't our QR codes. But mostly I just wanted to know who did come in first in test scores in Florida that relegated you to second, and what are they up to today? What have they done with it?
it was actually a kid named Ross Limp, and I knew him, and he actually was going to become like he could have been a neuroscientist or a rocket scientist, basically is what they told him. And he was going to go and work for NASA. And then this was his final year of school. He got expelled because of drugs. And now he is in the Navy.
I knew you were going to know who beat you, but my real question was, with high aptitude and a high achiever like you must have been, to get those test scores, how do you kind of stay sharp and stay curious and learn how to learn when some things like, might come easily or whatever?
Yeah. So I love the identity of what aptitude is for us as humans. And also like this idea of high performers, they say like, all right, I'm going to get a 6-pack of abs. I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to have them in 6 months because that's realistic. I don't care about that. I'm more abstract with my identity, and I'm loose with myself. I say, hey, Dale, you could probably be the smartest kid in the state of Florida if you put your mind to this and do it. But are you going to have fun doing that? Probably not in the traditional way, but how could you have fun? So I let myself have a little bit of like slack in the process of being sharp and learning the trends and like getting on TikTok. And I know Scott's like over here probably rolling his inner eyes, right? Like or taking good selfies either, Scott. So, but the thought process is that for me, I just love doing it, dude. And I'll tell you why, because I love the idea of people and community and fellowship and legacy, and that drives me. And so I don't need to be the best. So you can be better than me, John. You can be better at QR codes than me, and I'm totally okay with that. I love that. I want that, right? So if I'm loose with myself and I'm not high pressure, like Dale, you have to know all these things about sales. What's this thing that people are talking about now? If I'm instead just naturally curious and I apply my aptitude as a human being through my own experiences toward those subjects and say, I'm not going to be that good at golf. come to think of it, because I'm way better with my feet and playing soccer than I am with my hands and swinging a golf club. I wasn't good at baseball either. So will I go out and be good at it? And will I know a buttload about it? Yeah, because that's also something that I know deep down inside that I am skilled with, but I'm never forcing myself to become something that I'm not. It's one of the things that frustrates me the most about the sales world when I see somebody saying something like, if you want to be successful, do these 7 things. I'm like, shove it up your rear end. I want nothing to do with your 7 crappy things that literally nobody else is going to have success doing the way that you did, because you are an authentic human being that is named this. And I am Dale Dupree, named not yours. And I am also authentic, and I am not going to take your 7 things and do what you say to do. Are guidelines good? Are experiences good? Like if I told you, hey, I used the letter campaign to get into 500 accounts, and I sold all of them, and it took me, almost a decade, right, or 6 years, right? If I told you that, like, would you want to know more? Yeah, but then the other side of it would be like, you're probably not going to be able to do it, John, the same way I did it. So let's figure out how to make it work for you. So when I looked at the SATs and I looked at how to study for them, my mom actually gave me a book and said, hey, this is the best way to study for it. And I started going through the book and reading the questions and how to answer them. And I was like, I'm never going to learn this if I do it this way. Instead, I did the opposite. I learned it backwards, essentially, as opposed to the way that people told you to learn it, because that's how I think and that's who I am. And I had zero pressure on myself. When I went in that room that day, I answered everything in a pretty timely manner. I wasn't like rushed or in front of people. And when my scores came back, they actually made me take the test again because they were so high. And my second time, I scored higher. So it was actually kind of cool because I went from like being in like the top 10 to being in second place for the SAT scores, right? So if we take the expectations away, like we don't all have to be the best at everything that we do. We have to be the best at anything if we don't want that in our life, right? It's about that attitude. If we sit back and we look at the things that we desire and we're committed to those more so than anything else, we're going to be successful more so than the next guy or the next girl. And really, it's the idea too, John, because I love this question, obviously. It's the idea too of saying, well, how can I make Kelsey feel that she's important in my success? What about Valerie? How about Brian? How about Cynthia? If I think like that, there's fulfillment in that for me. And I know myself very well. And so I know that that's important. So like I mentioned my sales team earlier, I freaking love my sales team because I don't tell them what to do. They come to me and go, hey, I came up with this idea. What do you think? And I go, do it. Every time, do it. Even if I hate it, I go, do it, because I know it's going to make them happy, right? And that's what we've got to be thinking as leaders, and that's what we got to be thinking for ourselves individually as well too.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm just thinking about when I took the SAT now, and I may have still been high on mushrooms when I took the SAT. Just saying. And I definitely was the first person done in the whole entire room. And I remember looking around, kind of having a back to reality moment going, did I like skip part of this test? How am I done before everybody else? And then I panicked and just turned the thing in and was like, I got to get out of here. I'm way too fucking high for this. So
somebody threw up during my first run on the test. Somebody threw up.
Oh, like, man. They were probably like super stressed. They'd probably taken all the courses and studied for hours and hours and hours. And,
yeah.
Oh, man.
Probably.
Any last questions for Dale before we let him go and let everybody get to their evening? I got a Giants Dodgers playoff game to watch. I will not be available for the next few hours. I'll be full of stress. Anything that Dale can talk to us about? Connor, go ahead. I see you.
Yeah, man, I've got one. Hey, Dale. Fellow child prodigy turned traumatic events / burnout, dwindled, lost all my potential, what have you. We're gaining it back. But the question there is, with that natural aptitude, you mentioned pointing it towards something that's fun, right? Pointing it towards something that sparks that interest. And I guess any good exercises to gain that introspection or that self-awareness. I think I've tried the 27 seconds and all those things for so long. It's like, I don't know what's fun for me anymore. I know I have the aptitude. I've been successful a number of times before, crumbling and rebuilding, but I'm just kind of sitting here saying, what is fun for me? Where do I want to point this direction? Any good exercises to kind of self-awareness or self-inventory.
Have you ever journaled?
I've started. I don't know if I've ever actually dedicated to it. So
Okay, cool. That's a good enough answer for me to tell you that you've never journaled, and that's the first thing that you got to start doing. And so this is a moment too that you got to take seriously. People do this all the time. They start this process, they don't finish it, and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Journaling is not just about like expressing yourself. It's a literal log of your life. It's to go back and say, all right, I want to find this person that has fun. I want to also express the things that I understand that I have aptitude around currently, and where I feel that I can apply my aptitude even with where I am in life. Well, I got to go back to the beginning. Like I had to talk about my traumas. I had to talk to myself, right? Because I've never done that up until that point. Literally, right? A lot of that stuff I just kept in my head or I didn't express effectively. So you got to come back to that first and foremost before anything else. And when you're journaling, it's this log again, it's this identity of like, build out all the things that are bothering you, that you're thinking about, that you want to answer. Like you just said, I want to have fun, so I need to find it. Well, go find the things that are causing you to not have fun too. What's back there that you need to forgive? What's back there that you need to not forget, but acknowledge and move on from? There are things there for sure that are causing that concept, there, the identity of, I should say, of your roadblock. Journaling is one of the most powerful tools. I still do it. I just did it last night actually, and like drove myself to tears doing it. And I've been doing it for 10 years now, right? Because it's this moment that we can really connect with ourselves and really connect with what's important. And sometimes it's a venting session to some degree, but like if you have a spouse or you have a family member that you're open to showing those things to as well, that can mentor you through the process, show them as well, expose those inner demons, those things that are bothering you, that identity of fun that you're trying to find, and let people speak into your life in those moments and say like, dude, Connor, you're an awesome person. And I love that you've done this. And I just want to give you some encouragement. That's what usually comes out of those moments. And you get to see what you've been doing to other people, how you've been impacting them, affecting them. Because a lot of times as leaders, the one thing that we don't get ever is somebody breathing life back into us. So it's good to go get refueled at some point, especially if you're any kind of high I or high D personality. We don't think about that, but it very much is. It's actually a very natural human emotion that we crave and desire, whether we believe it or not. So journal, and then have somebody help with a little bit of that accountability side of things. A spouse or a significant other is the best way to do that because they know you better than you know yourself in some cases, and they can really expose those things with you.
100%. That's awesome. Thank you.
You got it, bro.
That was great. I love Connor's like introduction description of himself. I gotta go back and watch that. That was great.
It was good.
It was so good. So good. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Dale, man. We appreciate it. Appreciate you spending some time with us this evening away from family and everything. Congrats on everything you built with the Sales Rebellion. And, let me know, of course, if I can ever return the favor and be helpful. And I'm sure all these people would, jump at the opportunity to help and serve you as well. Anything you want to leave everybody with before we get out of here?
I just want to say thanks to everybody for their time, especially you, Scott, and really all of you equally, because time is the most important thing that we can give to one another. And so I'm grateful for your time tonight.
Thanks so much. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks again, Dale.